The historical record reveals a procedure splintered across multiple courts, a legal subversion fought between two distinct empires of law. First-century Jerusalem was a dual jurisdiction state. Power was strictly divided. On one side, the Jewish religious leadership operated out of the temple complex. On the other, the secular Roman Empire governed from the praetorium. This photograph shows the ancient olive trees in the Garden of Gethsemane. The legal irregularities began here, when religious authorities arrested Jesus in the dead of night, relying on a bribed informant. Under ancient Jewish procedural rules, an arrest made secretly at night using a paid accomplice was immediately illegal. The religious court, known as the Sanhedrin, wanted a death sentence, but they faced a massive logistical roadblock. Under Roman occupation, Jewish courts had been stripped of the ius gladiae, the legal authority to execute a prisoner. To achieve an execution, the Sanhedrin had to find a way to force the Roman Empire to intervene in a highly localized theological dispute. Phase 1 of the trial began with an illegal midnight hearing before the high priests Annas and Caiaphas. To secure a conviction, the court systematically abandoned its own strict rulebook. First, Jewish jurisprudence operated under the rule of sunlight. Capital trials were explicitly forbidden from taking place at night, and they could never be held on the eve of a religious festival. The prosecution also failed to meet strict evidentiary standards. A death sentence required the perfectly matching testimony of at least 2 witnesses. The court brought forward multiple accusers, but their stories consistently contradicted each other. Frustrated by the lack of evidence, Caiaphas placed Jesus under a binding religious oath to declare his identity. This directly violated the defendant's legal right against self-incrimination, intentionally forcing a confession of divine equality. Hearing this, the council immediately declared a unanimous guilty verdict for religious blasphemy. Legally, this was another massive violation. A unanimous capital conviction required a mandatory 24-hour cooling-off period to ensure the judges weren't acting as a conspiracy. By the time the sun rose, the court had systematically dismantled its own procedural safeguards to ensure the final result was never in doubt. This scale model illustrates the proximity of the temple to the Roman fortress. At daybreak, the religious leaders marched their prisoner out of the Jewish courts and directly to the Roman praetorium to secure their execution order. But a guilty verdict for Jewish blasphemy was useless in this new location. Roman law did not enforce theological disputes. Standing on the steps of the praetorium, the prosecution initiated a strategic shift. They fabricated 3 politically motivated charges: subverting the nation, opposing Roman taxes, claiming to be a rival king. They successfully morphed a disagreement over Jewish theology into lex majestatis, Roman high treason. They changed the crime to fit the jurisdiction of the new court. The case was now on the desk of the Roman prefect, Pontius Pilate. Pilate took the accused inside for a private interrogation. He expected to find a violent military revolutionary. Instead, he found a peaceful rabbi who showed no interest in armed rebellion against Rome. This carved stone inscription bears the name of Pontius Pilate, the official Roman authority in the region. Operating under that authority, Pilate issued his legally binding verdict, not guilty. He publicly declared that he found no factual basis for the charges of sedition. Instead of releasing the prisoner, Pilate attempted to avoid the anger of the mob by seeking a jurisdictional loophole. He tried to transfer the entire case to a regional ruler named Herod Antipas. When that failed, Pilate offered a series of compromises. He tried to release Jesus using a Passover amnesty custom, and when that was rejected, he ordered a brutal scourging, hoping the sight of physical torture would satisfy the crowd. Pilate was willing to brutally torture a man he had just officially declared innocent. He proved that under the weight of political pressure, Roman justice was entirely negotiable. The Jewish leaders deployed a final threat. Releasing a rival king would be reported to Rome as treason. This silver coin depicts Emperor Tiberius. A formal treason report to his ruthless court would guarantee Pilate's execution. The threat was absolute. Cornered, Pilate washed his hands in a basin of water. It was a legally meaningless gesture, attempting to use a local ritual to absolve himself of the Roman execution order he was about to sign. Pilate surrendered his jurisdiction entirely. He sacrificed an innocent life to an angry mob simply to ensure his own political and physical survival. The trial was a catastrophic institutional failure. Sacred religious law was subverted to reach a predetermined conclusion, and secular Roman law was subverted to appease a political threat. The proceedings ended with the release of Barabbas, a violent rebel walking free because a man declared innocent by the Roman judge took his place on the cross. The gavel fell on a verdict of death, marking a case where two systems of law were bent until they broke.